Hello! Finally made it. It's been a long delay and apologies this morning because, this afternoon. It's supposed to start at 2 o'clock and it's nearly where we'd normally finish off. So I dare say there'll be quite a few people who will miss the podcast this Saturday. So welcome to ArtCat. My name's Lee. And I've been doing the art podcast now for quite a few weeks and quite a few months, nearly almost coming up to a year in April. I've been doing this and still gremlins managed to find their way into the system. I decided to get them all try and sort it out this morning before we went live, and it took me a little bit longer than I hoped, but we're here. That's the main thing. When you come in, do say hello so I can see who's in the room. It'd be good to say hi and all the rest. Tell me where you are, tell me what you're working on, what type of artwork that you're doing, what type of artwork that you like. Have a conversation. Hopefully there'll be plenty more people joining us. Normally it was a nice little collection of people last week and the conversation was flowing, which was really cool. Lots of questions being asked and even answered by people in the chat room, so that's really important as well. As you can see, there's a little picture of the Sargent drawing that we were doing last week, so I can pull back on that and show you the bigger picture. There it is. And that was it, kind of finished off. It's not it's not an exact copy of Sargent. It's as close as I wanted to get it to without labouring it in the exercise. It was done in charcoal and I wanted to capture some of the qualities of his drawing style. Alex, hello, good morning to you. Apologies for being late. It's one of those things, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it's all sorted out. You can see a different setup this morning, so I've been playing around with different camera positions, so hopefully it'll work better for you today. I'm going to be doing some painting today, and I'm going to show you the setup and talk about the concept behind the portrait and the reason why I'm doing it, to hopefully kind of feed into what you're doing and the reasons why you're doing your artwork, and you can have a conversation about that. So if you've got any questions at all, just ask. So yeah, that was a portrait of Sargent. Shall I move out of the way now? Let's stick that down there. There is a slight delay between my camera and what's going on in real life and what's going on screen. So I'm kind of checking the screen to make sure it hasn't frozen or anything. So if you see this little scared look in my face, it's only because it's taking so long to get set up this morning. I wanted it to work. So I can move this now up and into shot. And this is a portrait of a friend. I'm working on a series of portraits called Mammalian. Bit of a mouthful. And it's kind of a following on from the Manimal range of work that I've been doing for quite a while now. Alex, you're saying it. I seem to log on to an old recording for a long time. I was very puzzled. Well, I'm glad I kept you company. But yes, no, this is the real live me today. It is the 30th of January 2021, if we want to kind of check it that way. The range of portraits that I am working on at the moment, called Mammalian, are based on people that I know and friends I've known for about the last 10 years. And I started this about 2.5 years ago, and I very quickly went round a group of people and asked friends that I know if they'd be interested in getting involved. And it starts off with a conversation, and I wanted it to be based on that conversation. So each portrait is based on that conversation. Now, it's not a realistic view of that person on that day, but it's about the conversation that we had. And I went around all my different friends and sat and chatted for a couple of hours over a coffee. Normally I got them to pick the place where they wanted to have a conversation, where they felt most comfortable. So sometimes it was in their home, sometimes people picked a different place, sometimes it was just in a coffee shop or a bar or wherever it was, and we would sit and just have a general conversation. There was no ulterior structure to it. I didn't want it to be me leading the conversation and kind of curating the reason why I was going to do this portrait on them and it's going to be about this. I wanted the portrait to be based on that conversation, so it was quite a natural flowing. And from that, ideas started to formulate about what I could do to emphasize what the conversation was about and a bit more about the person that was painting. Often when you are doing portraits, it's a very formulaic, stylized version of that person, and if it's in a studio setting, you're playing around with lights and you're trying to pull some essence of their personality out into the portrait, but you still seem to miss an awful lot more about the person. It's like one photograph doesn't tell you everything about a person. You don't see them in different aspects of their life, of their history, their aspirations, of their future and things like that. So they're all very different, and they're all very different people as well. One thing I like about my friend group is that there's a vast array of different types of people in it. All lovely, of course. So this is a friend of mine called Carly, and yeah, I said it was about 2.5 years ago. What I did was I did a pencil portrait of each person quite quickly, normally within a day or two from the actual conversation, just to capture them in a pencil form. And I took reference photographs of people during the conversation. I tried to keep it as natural as possible. I didn't want it to become about people kind of sitting and posing for a photograph. And I would then go back and kind of muse over the type of thing I would wanted to do. And I did initially start off painting, and this was one of them. I've got 3 paintings. You may have seen one of Steve, a friend I've done, with a large white long-haired lurcher in the background. Now, part of the mammalian process was to ask them the only one question that I had formulated throughout all of them was, if you're an animal, what would you be? Because the animal portraits that I do combine animal and human figures, but normally I would swap out people's heads and put an animal to represent them as a way of kind of describing a personality through animals. It's something that we've always done throughout art history and throughout different cultures around the world. So it's how we assimilate personality types to animals, and vice versa, how we can see a characterization of somebody. So when we're talking about he's a cheeky monkey, a sly old fox, or you may think of things like Animal Farm with George Orwell, so how he humanizes animals and how animals become humanized throughout the story. So it's a bit of an extension of that, but the animals that they decided that they wanted would appear in each composition of the painting. Alex, yes, so if the object is to draw shapes and tones, why does it matter doing a live sitting? How does it manifest itself in the picture if they are moving about? There's an essence to people's mannerisms when you're painting from life. You see depth in a different way than looking at a photograph, and what you physically see is different from say a screen on an iPad or a captured image. You can't, I mean, when you're drawing from life, you tend to stay in one position and keep your image quite still as possible. Obviously people move around, even natural body positions, if they sit to begin with quite upright and stiff, naturally over a period of time they'll start to kind of relax into their body shape, you know, then relax into the chair or things like that. But you do get a different quality of observation, let's say, and you still would work from shapes first, so it might be done over several sittings. And what you will find is a lot of artists, if they're doing a sitting from life, will mark the floor or mark the furniture. They'll take reference shots still, just so they can reposition the person when they come to do a second or third or fourth sitting. Sometimes you'll see people that leave the clothing that they were wearing and not actually be there, because you can look at the colour of material or pattern and things like that. So there is a difference, but the process is still very much the same. So you'd still work on the basic proportions and shape and how the proportions might fit on your canvas or your paper, the basic shapes of the forms of the body itself, the tones you can play around with. I mean, tones from life you can play around with as well. I mean, you can work from something in a studio setting, and when you're looking at your pictures a separate thing, a separate artwork, you can still make that artistic decision to push back tones to make it look muted or to make them more vibrant, and you can play around with saturation, things like that. That's your artistic flair, that's your artistic freedom, that you have that choice to make. So I hope that answers your question. There's nothing wrong from working from a photograph. I think a lot of artists now, and people's lives are very busy, the luxury of spending time sitting with an artist is lovely if you've got a sitter who's willing to spend that amount of time to come back and over several periods to work on a portrait. But often I think what you'll find today is a lot of people will work from reference photographs as well. But there's something really interesting about the conversation that comes out through the portraiture. When the Sky Portrait Artist of the Year was on, and you had that conversation between an artist and a sitter that was live, and now everybody was working else from screen because obviously it was COVID, and that's the reason why it was set up. It was put onto Sky TV's Facebook page, and if you go there you can capture up on some of those videos, and it lasted over 4 hours, and you can see even with the celebrities and people of note who were sitting would start off a little bit more posed, and as the conversation went on they kind of relaxed a little bit, and I think at that point that's when most artists kind of engaged with that portrait as well. They may be working out basic structures to begin with, and then as the portrait kind of went on you could see the personality in the conversation and how the artist warmed to the sitter and vice versa, and that added a little bit more to it. You could see people get more enthused about the conversation that we're having, or got excited about some similarities that they might have that they didn't know. So it might be about places that they've been, or a passion for music or theatre or literature or whatever it was, or some sort of connection there between the artist and the sitter. That infused into the portrait, and I think that's a small element that is really important, which is often kind of so subliminal that you don't quite see, and you can't quite phrase what it is, but it does make its way into the painting. I suppose you can walk around and see 3D shapes and different shading. Yeah, I mean that's the option you've got when you are working with somebody, is you can kind of move around and make different decisions. When you've taken a photograph and you're only working from that as a reference, you've got to be quite clever if you are changing something like a positioning of a hand, say for example. So in this reference shot that I've got, well I haven't got a reference for the shot, in this portrait that I've got, she's holding an orangutan. So I'm going to zoom out. She wasn't wearing a suit of armour. There we are. She's holding an orangutan with a small child. Now, on the day, Carly was not wearing a suit of armour, and she was not holding a tiny orangutan, holding a small baby orangutan. This is the conceptual side, so it's where you can add other elements to your portraiture that might not exist in real life. So it's a mix of imagination, surrealism, and reality, and putting those things together. It can add more narrative, and you could add elements into it. But as I say, I kind of hit a plateau in my painting that I knew that something with my quality of my painting wasn't quite there yet, and I had to go away and think about it and develop my style a little bit more, and not saying my style, but even the quality of my painting, to try and get the qualities in my artwork that I want, and it wasn't quite there, so I had to go away and work on it. And this is the things that you don't necessarily see when you see an artwork up on the wall. You don't necessarily see how long it takes to do a painting. So somebody might say, how long did it take you to do this? Well, this isn't finished yet, and it's taken 2.5 years to get to it. Now, I can do a portrait painting in 4 hours, but this portrait and some of the other animal drawings or paintings, mammalian paintings that I've done, are not finished yet, and there's more work to do. There's about 27 portraits, and eventually what I'd like to do is have an exhibition with them. But I want the qualities of the portraits to be right. So you have to take it on the chin sometimes when you look at it and going, quality of my work's not good enough yet. There's elements that I like, and there's elements that I need to work on. Now, I've kind of worked up some of my skill level, so there's the technical narrative of painting and also the storytelling, the conceptual side, and they have to kind of balance. And I had what I feel is a really good concept and a good narrative that I like about the whole story of a mammalian and the story of my friends and how I like to portray them, but my technical expertise wasn't quite achieving what I wanted. And I think that's always an ongoing process, and you always have to keep pushing it a little bit more, but it has to come at a stage where you have to get on with it and do it. But there's also a stage where you have to acknowledge, okay, this is not quite what I want. I need to go and study a little bit more. I need to go and research things, and that's what I've been doing. So I think initially I told everybody, yeah, I'm going to do all these portraits and I'm going to put them out there. I'm going to have an exhibition next year and blah blah blah. And that was 2.5 years ago. And you know, I've been in contact with lots of them, obviously because of my friends, since then, going, look, it's taken a little bit longer, and everybody's just gone, yeah, fine, take as long as you need. One of the reasons why I didn't give myself a date when I started doing these. I didn't say to myself, right on Tuesday the 4th of March 2020 I'm going to have an exhibition on these. I'm quite glad I didn't do that, because it would have been COVID, but I wanted to take that pressure off. I want to do the work first, so the work's ready to go as a collection of works, and then work on the idea of the exhibition. So it's a longer process. It's not a case of giving myself a date and painting right up to that date and then stopping and putting the exhibition up and walking away. I'm quite enjoying the whole process of developing the paintings. So it does ask the question about speed. Yes, you can paint a painting quite quickly and everything can fall into place and you're quite happy with it, and that's great. And when that works, it's wonderful. But there is an element sometimes where you just need to take your time, and so the idea of speed dissipates and goes out the window, and it's about the quality of your work that you want to achieve, and that in itself can be an enjoyable process. It's not necessarily it's not frustration. It's an acknowledgement of, okay, I just need to develop these skills. I need to go and find inspiration. I need to go and find answers to the technical problems that I'm finding as an artist or as a painter or a drawer or whatever it is. So when you're reflecting back on your artwork, don't think, oh well, you know, I'm not that good because Lee did that portrait in 4 hours, or Lee did that picture in a week, and I'm nowhere near as good. I've been working on my picture for X amount of weeks and it's still not there yet. That's okay. Don't pressurize yourself with time. Don't even pressurize yourself. It's just find the answers to the qualities that you like. Now, it's not to say that when I'm about to start painting these again that I think I have found all the answers in my painting. There is a discussion between you and your artwork as you're working about, you know, each brush mark, each colour that you're putting on, and the quality of the surface that you're working with. There's a kind of like a constant conversation going on, but you give yourself a guide about the style of thing that you want to aim for, and I think that at a stage you will get near to it as possible for that painting, and then you move on to the next one, and you get near to it as much as possible, and then you move on to the next one. I don't think you could work on one work forever, but as an artist you want to keep producing different works to keep yourself engaged with what you're doing. And I think if you start to do a work and you're getting a bit bored of it, put it down for a while. Start a new drawing, but do go back to that drawing again after a while, a little bit of a break, and see the qualities in it, both good and bad. Good so it can inspire you to move on, and the elements that you don't like you can improve on, and it can sometimes give you a direction about what you need to go and research. Now the research side of it sounds really laborious and a bit academic, and I would say don't look at it in that way. Try and find out the qualities that you are wanting to learn, and go and find your inspiration. Find it out through other artists doing similar work to you that have the qualities that you like, and find a way of communicating with them. Find if they're living artists, have a conversation through their Facebook or Instagram or their website. A good research can come through studying for example, old masters, and finding elements of their work that really inspire you, and then you can sort of research into the technical side of it as well, where you can look at their the way they'll set up, or the way they will paint something, or the way they observe something, the qualities that they will use in their paint. What paints are they using? Are they making their own? Are they using specific brands for specific reasons? Now when we're all starting off painting and drawing, we tend to buy what we can afford at the time, and you build up a collection of different materials. But through that experience you start to find an affinity with a certain paint or a certain pencil, a certain brand, and sometimes that technical side of it, that's that kind of inquisitive nature of trying to find out and go, well, what's this do and how does that work? Oh, I see that person's using a different solution, I wonder what that's like, I'll try it out, and doing little experiments along the way. All of that is research, but it's not laborious in going, I must study this person and write a thesis on them and things like that. I'm not talking about that level of study. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of actively physically doing something, and sometimes you need a little bit of guidance, and you'll have to go and investigate. So if you want to swap the word out for research and make it an investigation, sounds a bit more CSI, but whatever works for you, do it that way. There's nothing wrong going back to doing a bit of study. There are plenty of online workshops from really good artists that are out there, and a lot of professional artists now are doing sort of online classes where you may pay up to a couple of £100 or a couple of $100, but you'll get a very intense package of qualities of working in a specific genre that will really push your artwork forward. So it's about finding the direction that you want to go artistically, finding the resource that can help you get there, and then taking bits of that information, trying it out, failing a couple of times, succeeding a few more times, and then pulling those elements and putting them back into your work. So hopefully that answers. Yeah, so great questions, Alex, thank you for that. I see a few more people have joined us. So if you're happy enough, jump in the chat bar, say hello so they know who's in the room. I say I'm going to be doing some oil painting. Now over the last few weeks I've done a lot of drawing in pencils and charcoals. I did a bit of painting throughout the Sky Portrait Art of the week that was on online because of COVID, which is good fun, and I did manage to break out the oils a couple of times and just have the pleasure of painting. I love painting, and I love colour as well, often because I do an awful lot of my work in pencil and graphite, marine monochrome. People think, oh, he doesn't paint, but I do. I do lots of other things as well. I use monochrome specifically in a lot of my portraiture and the manimal range of work, and it goes back to my love of old black and white films. As a kid growing up, I would watch them, and I would often remember the film in colour. I would allow my imagination to fill in the details, but what I loved was the structure of light in those films. Used to get them played on a Saturday morning when I was a kid. Now there's like movie channels that you can watch old movies on, and it's great. It's just how they would have structured the scene, and it wouldn't be all about special effects and CGI back in the day. It would have been about the creativity they would have done with light to add the drama, and I quite like that element to it where you get to involve your imagination. So I remember I did a drawing. This is like very early on. Did a drawing of a ginger cat. People go, "I love that ginger cat drawing that you did," and I go, "How do you know it's ginger?" And you see that slight confusion because they realised it was in black and white. But the tonality of that cat would kind of suggest that it was a ginger Tom, and I love the fact people's imaginations were being sparked off, and they could see the colour, even though they were looking at black and white image. So that's one of the reasons why I started to kind of play around with that. I've done a lot of portraits of my partner, Andrea, and she's got this lovely red hair, and you don't see that in the black and white photograph, but you get the essence that her hair has a slight redness to it. I don't know what it is about the subconscious that kind of fills in that information, but certainly it kind of is there still. So that was one of the reasons why I stayed quite monochrome, using the charcoal and the pencils. But with paint you can add another layer, and you can emphasize color in lots of different ways. You think about it like a TV screen. On your TV you'll have, well, in remote, I was going to say the buttons, shows you how old I am, but on your remote now you can play around with the saturation. You can turn it right up and it's glaring at you. You know, the reds really pop, and it looks almost like a cartoon version if you turn up the saturation on the colour. And if you can turn it right down, and just almost before it gets to black and white, it is so muted, and it adds a different feeling. Now you might be watching the same image on the screen, but it gives you a different response. And when you're painting, that's the thing you're doing, really. You're playing around with the response of the quality of thing that you're looking at. So if you want somebody to be like pop art and energetic and like the colours are almost vibrating, you might play around with the saturation of your colours and really turn them up. You might want to play around with them and make it subtle, and mute them a little bit and soften them a little bit, so it gives you a softer feeling to the portrait. There's a reality to light, because you're trying to create the illusion of something that's in existence, that certainly in this case where we're looking at, let's zoom out and show you. So we're looking at Carly in a suit of armour that doesn't exist, carrying a little tiny orangutan with a baby orangutan, and you've got to think about how those things are going to be in your imaginary existence but have a certain reality to them. So where we're looking at the depth, say, behind the orangutan before it meets the breastplate of the armour, you've got to create that illusion of depth. How are you going to do that? You've got to think about light and tone and shadow. Yeah, actually, for how you're old, I remember AC/DC and also 1979. Oh, did you see them? I'm so jealous. I would love to see AC/DC. It's on my bucket list, and they've just brought out a brand new album, and it's amazing. So they're still going today. So in a way, you know, but it's funny. We were having a conversation with Andrea because she's a big AC/DC fan as well, and we were saying about there's like a whole new age group, like you're way younger than us, growing up now, because they were introduced to Iron Man. Sorry, not Iron Man. They were introduced to it through Iron Man and Black Sabbath and all those bands, because they're in the soundtrack. So yeah, no, I do. House Bells, Back in Black is a brilliant album. Slight segue there. Bon Scott days. I see. I'm a Brian Johnson fan. I mean, this is the whole thing about Bon Scott and Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson's been in that band forever. Yes, I've been in AC/DC a long time, and he's still classed as the new singer. And I don't think it should be either or. You can have both. Definitely can have both. They add a different flavour to the band, to the vocal sound. But I like Brian Johnson. Okay, what I love about Arcade is we can segue off into lots of different stuff. Great. So yeah, if you've joined us, say hello in the chat. Say who you are, so we can have a conversation about what we're doing. So let's see. We'll get on to the painting now. I'll try and get a bit of focus on this because it's a little bit out of shot. I'll wait for the camera to catch up to the TV screen. So I'm going to show you how I set up today, and a few little tips that I've got as well about if you are going to paint. I'm working in oils today, and how you can set up your palette. So it's a little bit darker. Let's see if I can turn a bit more light on that. Let's see if that works a little bit. Who would have thought one of my sons would see them all that years later? Oh wow, your son saw them as well. We went to go and see AC/DC in Dublin a few years back, and I sat up like ready to go when the tickets were being released, and literally they were released on 9 o'clock in the morning, and as soon as 9 o'clock hit, they were sold out. And it's literally how fast you could click that button, got you your tickets. And then obviously people put them on prices, and they were just astronomically high, and just went, can't afford it. So hopefully that's a little bit better and brighter on there now. Hopefully try and get that to catch on my hand so I can focus a little bit better. Just wait for my camera to catch up to the screen. I'm amazed at what the delay is between me talking and what comes out on YouTube online. Is about, must be like nearly a minute or so. So sometimes when I move camera position, I'm just working away, and by the time the actual camera position comes up on screen, it's like, oh, I have to adjust it. So that's a little bit better. It's a little bit more fuzzy than I wanted, but it's one of those things. If I zoom out a little bit, I can show you what I have down here. Now, often working from a palette when you're painting, set all your paints out, you start painting, and everything becomes quite messy. You know, paint starts going over how you've mixed up colours in different places and things, and if you're not careful, you'll end up with a palette that is as messy as that. You know, it looks wonderfully artistic, but functionally when you're painting, it's really difficult to see colours, because you're dealing with one colour over another colour next to another colour, and then you can get paint that mixes into the paint that you're mixing up for something specific, and it gets a bit messy, and this gets quite confusing after a while, where as you're really involved with your painting, you'll mix up a little bit of colour here, which is perfect, and then start painting and come back and go, oh, where was that colour? Because it's so saturated with lots and lots of colours that you can't quite find where it is. Also, your paint that you may have got set out gets kind of sucked into your actual mixing paint board as well. So this is to prove that I also do that, and it's not a great habit to be in. But I was watching a few different artists online, and I started to answer some of the problems that I was having, because that was one of the elements I was having problems in my painting. My mixing up paint was becoming quite messy, and it was affecting the quality of my painting. It was slowing me down as well. So what I noticed that they had was, a lot of artists had these tables with a sort of a grey finish underneath, and I was trying to find out why they were doing that. this is one of those kind of nest of tables that you can get. You know, the 3 tables that can kind of fit into each other, and they come with like a glass top and like a fake leatherette thing underneath. Well, this is one of those. I've got the other 2 tables set up. One has got my paints on it, which you can see on the left hand side there. So this is another one of the tables underneath. So it's really functional. You can pick them up in charity shops now for next to nothing. I mean, literally, I think I bought this lot for about £15 in a charity shop. As a piece of furniture for the home, they're not necessarily the most fashionable thing to have, but for artwork, they're brilliant. Now, they do come with a toughened glass top, and all I've done is I've cut a piece of grey paper. You can see there the leatherette finish that you normally find. Cut a piece of grey paper to the size of the glass, popped it in, and popped the glass back down. This gives me a great base to see colour. If you're working on palettes and they're particularly dark, when you start mixing up colour, that dark background is quite a contrast to your colour, and the colours can look more vibrant. What I wanted was a mid-tone grey, and that's what I've noticed from other artists using. They kind of either painted the underside of their glass tabletop, or they got thickened safety glass and painted it grey, and then put that on the table. Now this is kind of ready to rock and roll. Costs 15 quid. Piece of grey paper, not that much, and the glass itself is already toughened, and it's great to paint on. It also means it's really easy to clean. When you're working with oils, or even your acrylics, if you're working with acrylics, you know, you have to get used to cleaning up after yourself. But what is quite good is, as you're working, after you paint for a little while, you can literally take a cloth and wipe the oil off the surface and clean it up as you go. You can keep your colours around the side, and you've got a nice mixing surface area. Using a palette knife to mix your paints together to get the colours that you want, rather than me using the brush to kind of try and mix the colours. What you'll find is, when you're mixing with brushes, as you take the paint and mush it around, you'll get little bits of paint that will move their way up up to the ferrule of the paintbrush, but you'll get sort of different colours still mixed in with the paint. Sometimes that can be really interesting to paint with. If you look at Van Gogh and look at the actual paint marks that he had, each paint brush mark has loads of other colours swirled into it, and it makes his palette and his artwork sing with colour, and that's a technique that he found that really suited him. But for the quality of painting that I'm looking to try and get, I need to be a little bit more clever with the paint. The paint actually I just want to be on there is that colour. I don't want 15 different colours that it took to get, say, a particular blue also swirled in with the paint, that when I make a brush mark on the canvas, that some of those other colours are visible. So one of the reasons to do this was to answer that question: how do I get a cleaner painting process going on? I'll talk about some of the paints that I've got here as well. As I'm working in oil paints, you'll see me using this little contraption as well. Oil paints can be expensive, and you know, depending on either the brand or the level of pigment there is in the colour. You know, some colours are more expensive because of the minerals that are involved in making the paint. But what you'll find is, as you get older paint tubes, you get sort of this crustiness effect started happening, and because they're like normally in this like metal casing, it's quite hard to squeeze out all the bits of paint that end up in the bottom of the paint tube, and sometimes it splits and pokes out through the side, and we normally find it's like toothpaste, where you end up doing this to the lid of it and it splits here and all the paint starts squishing out from the side. All of these things add to a messier surface when you're painting, because you'll get it on your fingers, you'll put it on the handles of your brushes or your palette knives, and when you're moving things around, you'll start to transfer this paint into the paint that you're trying to mix, or into the painting surface when you're moving it around. So it sounds incredibly sterile to work in that way, but I have found that when I'm looking at the artist quality that I really admire, and when I try and pull into my artwork, they're working in a much cleaner way. And it's not my natural way of working. If any of you have watched me paint and draw, I'm quite messy. But it's something that I'm trying to practice, so it's a learning curve for myself to work in this way, but I do find it being a little bit more successful in the end result, and it's a little bit more efficient in the paint and the painting process. I say speed isn't necessarily a thing, but if I'm not faffing around trying to find colours, or I'm not constantly trying to clean my fingers off before I touch anything, it saves me time. And so working smarter is not necessarily working harder, but it's a bit of a change culturally for me. So if you're first starting off, if I can suggest it, work in a good mythology in your studio setup, because it will aid you to paint easier. And it's literally about that, it's about painting easier. There are lots of different mediums that are involved with oil painting, and again, this is experimentation and research and reading books about it and articles and watching podcasts about what different artists use as a medium source. Especially with oil paints, you know, there's the people are still using terps and things. Now, one, it's not great for you breathing in those fumes all that time, but you can get things like Zest It, if I pop that up there. You get things like Zest It, which is a low odorless mineral spirit, and it's great for diluting oil medium, and it's great for cleaning your brushes as well. Although you can get bars now, it's like a soap bar that you can brush your brushes into, and creates like a soapy solution which breaks down the oils and really cleans out your brushes. Look after your brushes, you will save a fortune having to buy new ones. When you're painting, your bristles stay nice and soft, but you can also shape your bristles after you've painted, and they last a long time. I haven't been quite so fastidious in the past, and therefore I've spent a fortune on brushes, used them once or twice, and had to chuck them away. And that's not the brush's fault, it's just the way I was working. There are other mediums that you can mix with your oils to make the oils flow easier, to slow down the drying time, to quicken the drying time, to give you a certain flow or consistency to the oil paints without losing the pigment, because it's always the pigment that you're looking to try and get. You can mix mediums that can give you a lovely glaze, so you can layer oil over oil, and light can then transfer through the different oil layers and pick up, say, a ground that you've got. Now for this particular one, I've got this like burnt umber background. Now this isn't going to necessarily stay in the picture, but as a ground it's got a warmth to it, and if I start to add layers of paint on top of that, that warmth still comes through layers of these oils, because it's only a translucent surface. Also, when you're painting, you paint with thinner layers to begin with and build up the thickness of your paint, so it's what they call fat over lean. Sometimes the terminology is a little bit confusing, and also how different countries call things different things. But what I say is start off thin layers to begin with, and build up your layers of paint, build up your tone, so you can add real depth to your colours. So you can research into what works for you. Now it may be that you want to be a bit more expressive and you just want to put the paint on there and you just want to get the vibrancy of the colours, and that's fine. That's a painting style that's still valid. You know, you can look at Basquiat, and did he study and worry about the translucency of the fat over lean, blah blah blah. no, he just put the colours on there and it worked for him and his style of work, and that's great, you know. But the quality of work that I want to try and get to, that wouldn't work. So I have to be more considerate of that. So you can use stand oil, or it's a linseed based oil, and you can add a little bit of the solvent to that to make it flow a little bit easier. It's quite thick, so I need to thin this down. So what I've got are, you know, many little glass jars that I can sort of mix solutions of paint up into, or play around with the mediums. So I'm mixing linseed oil with a little bit of solvent and different ratios until you find out what works for you. Michael, hello, good to see you. Sorry for being late. I'm going to do a little bit of painting today, a little bit different from the drawing. So yeah, so I'm just talking about the setup and the painting. Now I'm going to be doing this painting over a longer period of time. I won't necessarily be working on this next week. I might be going back to do another bit of drawing, but I just wanted to kind of show you that you can work on lots of different things. You know, people often get tired of sort of maneuvered into being in a pigeonhole of doing certain things, because people like to have kind of a grasp on, oh, you are a, you know, portrait painter, and you are a still life painter, and you are a landscape painter, and you must paint in oils. But when I was studying through the Sargent portrait, so we're working on the last few weeks, I've got a great book on him, and I was reading through it, and you know, he moved from doing these very well respected, beautiful paintings of the great and the good of his day, into doing quicker, more descriptive in lots of ways, drawings of people, but you can see he was getting a little bit jaded by doing portraits, and then he moved into doing landscapes, and visually the landscapes were quite interesting, and you can see a language in his painting changed. When you look at people like Turner, where the representation of things changed into an abstraction, an expression of what the landscape was about that he was working on, where it wasn't necessarily about having a most beautiful detailed train. It was about, what did that train feel like as it rushed past you, and the blur of the image, and the cacophony of colour and sound, and how that transformed into his brush marks and how he put paint on. So I say painting's not just about realism, it's about the expression as well. But that all comes down to your concept and what it is you're trying to get across. So when you start to think about your artwork and the subject matters that you're painting, you start to ask yourself the question, what is it that I'm trying to say here? What is it? If I was to verbally describe this, if I was to use words, what would I want to describe it as? So in its basic form, you might say, oh, it's very gentle, or it's soft, calm, delicate, or is it bold, brash, garish? Now, those two different set of phrases or words can sometimes direct you into doing certain things. It can change your colour palette, it can change your brush marks, it can change your expression of how you actually put the image down. Do you need to be so detailed if you're trying to make somebody bright and garish and bold and dynamic? You know, you might use your looser, freer marks, and accuracy to realism isn't necessarily the goal. You're trying to give the expression of something. Now, it's not to say that doesn't exist when you're doing something that's soft and calm, because you have to be more considered over the mark quality that you're putting down, and it's just as considered if you're being controlled and delicate and refined, where you can't just slap that down. You have to think about how you're actually going to put these things down, and this is where it goes back into research and trial and error and experimentation, and you have, you know, other canvases set around that you can kind of experiment on. You know, as you might have a separate piece of paper, you try something out and go, does that work as a brush mark? You might try it out a few times on a separate piece of canvas to see if it works. You put the brush mark down, you build up confidence that way. You build up a knowledge where you go, yeah, that does. Oh, I'm glad I tried that out, because now I know that it's going to work. Or you might try something out and go, oh god, that looks awful. I'm glad I didn't put that on my canvas, because I need to think, how am I going to get that? I thought that brush mark would work, and it doesn't. I might need to think about this. I might need to do a bit more experimentation. So there's a bit of a pull and push to your research, your experimentation, the actual physicality of doing an artwork, and then recalling it back and trying something else new, and it all feeds into the work that you produce. Over a period of time, you build up a knowledge bank of things that you're comfortable with, things that you like, things that artistically speak to you, and those are the things that you can hone and refine as you're doing your work. So it's not such the big learning curve. When you're first starting off, you don't know anything and everything goes uphill. But as you build up your level of knowledge, you'll start to have different things that will push your research, or investigation about what it is that you want your artwork to become. And that's the exciting part of artwork, to be honest with you. Often when you're coming towards the end of a painting, you have to concentrate not to rush it, because you were thinking about the next one. It's not as exciting, and to put the little tiny highlights in places to get the thing finished. But you do have to have that level of pace and observation still to go, I can't just rush these highlights and bits and pieces that I'm putting on. I've got to think about the quality of them still. But a lot of your work is already done, and your enthusiasm for this picture, if you've been doing it for a while, you might want to rush it and do something else. And often what I'll do is I'll kind of leave it for a little while just to finish it off and start another painting, so I can pick that painting up and then see it afresh and just finish it off quite quickly, and then it's done. Often the question you get asked is, how do you know when you're done? And that's a never-ending question for lots of artists, including myself. But I did hear a good explanation of it, where one artist, I don't know who it was from a podcast that I heard, I can't remember who they were talking about. So how do you know when your artwork is done? And the artist said that he surrounds himself with his inspiration artists, the people who inspired him to paint. So it might be Velasquez, it might be Rembrandt, it might be Van Gogh, it might be some Basquiat. They surround themselves with all these people and the different qualities that feed into their work. And once they answer each of their artistic expressions, they get the expressionism and vibrancy of the mark making of Basquiat, they get the level of understanding light from Rembrandt, they get the effortless mark making by Sargent in his paint marks. Once they get those into their artwork, each of these artists leave the room until the only person left in the room is you, and you put your paintbrush down and you leave because the painting is done. And once you've put your bit into the artwork as well, you leave. That's it. And I thought it was such a lovely, kind of very romanticized, but a lovely descriptive way of, it's the qualities of work that you put into your artwork. Once they're there, don't faff with them, don't fiddle with them, don't play with them. Allow that to come out through your experimentations and your next artwork and your next push to see where the boundaries are for your artwork. But don't try to confuse each painting with it. Answer the questions and move on. You will learn by doing. You'll learn by the next painting. You'll learn by the next painting, and that's what pushes what I've come across and what I can see. And it's just my opinion, but what I've seen in people's artwork is, as they progress, their artwork progresses as well, because there's a constant push to change the quality and move forward, and that's never ending. There's not an end goal in sight. It's just a natural inquisitiveness into their process. I wonder if I do this, how can I improve that? What do I really like? That's okay for that subject matter or that painting, and that works, and that's great, but this painting requires something else. This subject matter, this descriptive process that I want to try and put into this, or this concept that I'm building up, that style of painting doesn't quite fit this piece of artwork, and I need to change it up a little bit and to add new elements to my painting process, and that will develop different styles and schools of art and things like that. You can get quite formulaic with painting, and you can get quite set in your ways, and like, this is how you do it, and that can be fine. It can build up a very strong body of work as well, but don't let it become your prison. That's something to be aware of. Certainly not at the beginning when you're starting out, because everything is exciting and new, and you don't know what this brush does, and why do you use a filbert and you don't use a square and a round, and what's the difference of these brushes, what's the difference of these mediums, and the difference of the paints and things. They're your learning curve. It's great when you're starting off because everything's up for grabs, and you'll make choices as you go along. But once you get comfortable and you get a certain quality into your artwork, people can be a little bit afraid to move past that, and after a while it becomes quite tedious because you're known for doing a particular thing in a particular way, and you feel like you're not allowed to move out of it because the people who buy or collect your artwork expect that of you. And as I would always say, you're the artist, and you can make that decision to do your core work and do something else as well, experiment and play, and keep yourself enthused, and it can feed back into the work that you're doing in your core work, and it can improve it. So to try and keep that level of enthusiasm in your work that you're doing. So whatever it is you're working on at the minute, you might be just doing the background, and you might be going, oh god, it's just so boring doing the background because it's just dark and I can't be bothered putting this in, my arm's tired and I have to change direction. If you're getting bored with what you're doing, stop, take a break, go for a walk, work on another artwork, but come back to it and finish it off. Come back to it and do 10 minutes. Come back to it and next week and do 10 minutes more until it's done the way you want it. But don't ever get bored in creating artwork. If you're bored and you're enthused, one, you'll make silly mistakes. You'll make slip-ups. You'll rush it because you just want it over with. So all the effort that you put in there is then lost. Take your time over it. Don't rush. But your objectivity stays with your artwork, that you can see it for what it is, rather than just you think you can kind of see the tone that you're going for and that'll kind of do. That kind of lack of focus can actually pull your artwork down. So keep your enthusiasm up. It might be quite short chunks of time to begin with, but as you develop your skills and your artistic knowledge, those periods of painting or drawing times can be longer and longer and longer because you just engage with what you're doing. It's trying to hit that sweet spot. So often people say, how long do you paint for? And I don't know a specific answer to that. I know some artists who will get up at 9 o'clock in the morning and paint till 5 and put the paintbrush down, and they're quite structured in the way they do things, and I applaud them for that, and because that's their way of working. I'm not like that. I am somebody who once I start, I'm engaged with it, and that's it, and the world can be doing all sorts of things can be happening outside my little art world, but I am so focused in on what I'm doing that it all drifts away, and my focus is here, and I can do that for long periods of time. Sometimes I'll be engaged for an hour, and then I'll start to wander off, and I'll start thinking about shopping, and as soon as that happens I put my paintbrushes down. I don't try and paint at the same time. So it's trying to keep that balance in what you do artistically and what you do kind of around life around it. Be engaged with what you do at the time. If you're finding that you're engaged with what you do but keep getting distracted, maybe find the time to do your artwork, that you structure an hour or two where the rest of the world knows that you are working on your artwork at that time, so not to bother you. Sometimes you have to curate it. You have to get that agreement with the people around you. If we decide to go for a walk and I go, I'm painting, I have to acknowledge that I've already made that agreement to go off for a walk at say 5 o'clock. That I know that, so I need to put my brushes down and go off for a walk with a family member or whatever. You can curate it, you can control it, but what I say is, once I am in my studio and I know the time that I'm in here, and I get comfortable and I get all my things set up and I feel engaged with what I'm doing, I get excited about what it is I want to work on, I'm there. And hours can drift by, and that's why I don't necessarily know how long it takes me to do something, other than when I'm timed on, say, Sky Projects, where you have a limited time. But you can set yourself up or gear yourself up into that mindset and get yourself ready. So it takes away some of the worry about doing it. So if you've got 4 hours to paint and no other distractions, that's something to really look forward to. Because the cat isn't meowing at the door and doesn't demand feeding because somebody else is going to take care of it for you because you're painting. Where you know that there may be a certain goals that you want to achieve in that time, so you have an expectation and a plan. And as I said, it sounds formulaic, but once you're in it and you start using that process on a regular basis, it becomes second nature. You don't have to think about it. It doesn't feel quite so mechanical, but your work, you can produce an awful lot more. So it can look impressive to somebody from the outside, going, oh my god, you did that in such a short period of time. Well, it's taken a long time to get there. I'm quite a slow learner about these things, and I have to mull things over. So these portraits, two and a half, 3 years down the line, still not done. But now I'm getting to a stage now where I can just engage with them and do them. And so when people will ask me when they're all done and they're up in the exhibition, how long did this portrait take you to do? I can't say 2.5, 4 years, because I didn't physically spend every day working on this canvas. But it's taken me that length of time to understand elements of my painting which aren't technically at the stage of painting it, to learn some of the stuff I've needed to learn, to go through that experience of starting it and stopping it and the frustration of not being able to finish it because my experience is not there, but to go off and try it out and make experiments and do paintings, and for not to be that successful, and to learn things about paintings that I was playing with and going, oh, that works, and see them and build all that quality into my sort of toolbox of knowledge, so I can just dip into it and put it into my painting straight away. So yeah, these things take time. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. So yeah, if you've got any questions at all, ask away. This is Art Cat and an art chat, so this is about what you want to talk about as well, rather than me just rambling. I say this is my palette that I've got set up, and how I set up my paints as well. I kind of set them up in the same way all the time, and moving from light to my darks, just so I know where certain paints are, but I'm not kind of running all over the place trying to, take a red that's next to like my blue and accidentally kind of mixing them together. You'll find that there's a sequence that I put in. See, there's different properties to different paints that we can talk about. You might all just be interested in drawing, but think about it as like each pencil. If your pencils are all over the place, as mine often are, and again, I'm quite messy when it comes to my painting and drawing, and it's something I'm working on at the minute to try and improve upon. But if I have my pencils laid out in front of me in their grades, I know where to put the pencil up. I know what pencil I need. If they're in a box, which is not often the case, I've got things in a box, I put a rubber down, I can't find the rubber. I spend 5 minutes looking for a rubber. Or the covers for the soft charcoal palette things that I have, the spongy little triangle things. If I don't have them in one place, I'm constantly searching around for them, or I can't find the model razor. It's a lot of stop starting in the process of actually drawing, and really what I want to do is I'll be focused on my artwork and just pick the thing up that I need and work on it and then put it back down. And getting into a good pattern of that process is a good work ethic. I'm having to learn the hard way because it's something that I'm not necessarily straight. It's not necessarily my go-to right now. So yeah, anyway, I'm working on my palette. So I've got my titanium white. You can get different brands of titanium white. I'm using a Michael Harding one for this, but Winsor & Newton do a great titanium white as well. There are lead whites and flake whites, and you'll see each of these whites have a different translucency. I do actually like the Winsor & Newton titanium white because it has a solidity to it, and a flexibility to make lots of different lighter colours. Now, I can go on to whites and colours as we go on, but I just wanted to show you the setup of my board. I've also got one of these, which is a little kind of solvent and medium holder. Rather than having a huge tub of this stuff, I'm using a little bit and working with it, keeping it nice and clean. Once this gets dirty, clean it out and put new stuff in it. Where if you sort of are using huge jars like this filled with say the zested solvent to thin paints out or to clean your brushes and stuff, you're chucking large amounts out of it very, very quickly. A little goes a long way with oil paints that you can clean your brushes off. A good rag, so if I move my my naughty palette out of the way, a rag to clean off your brushes and clean before you mixing up new paints and put them on your boards and stuff. The way I'm going to work is putting my lights down, going in from whites to yellows to the reds, oranges, reds, going into my browns and umbers, and then into my blues, and then black right at the very end. And then I've got this lovely colour wheel of colours that I can dip in and out of, and this will become my mixing area where I can mix up the paints to my own satisfaction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the colours that I would normally put into the palette for this picture. A different range of colours here. Crimson. Now again, there is a world of different colours, and each brand has a slightly different colour. So you might get one brand that says cadmium red, and another brand that's a cadmium red, and the two cadmium reds are completely different. You know, there's different qualities of paint, so we're looking at different series. One it'll normally give you a lot of information on the back of these paints, so it'll tell you about the pigment and their light fastness, how much pigment is actually in the paint. So you know, when you're looking at some, say, cadmium reds from some brands, they're really mega expensive. When it comes down to the quality of them, it's because there's a lot of pigment in there and they're very, very rich. You don't actually need to use an awful lot of them to change the colour of your paint. So let's make sure nobody else is chatting there. No. So yeah, if I haven't bored you senseless out there, ask any questions you want. It might not be paint related, it might be just art related. Yellow ochre. Well, say for example, this Winton yellow ochre is kind of a student range, and the Michael Harding yellow ochre is more professional range of paints. Now they look very similar, but the consistency of pigment is different. You'll see that there's a slightly more lighter yellowness to the Winton than there is to the Michael Harding one. There's a slight tonality difference. There's a wonderful painted part of their tubes which shows you what the paint is like, and often the remanufactured paint that's on the outside of other packaging isn't the same as the colour. It might be a little bit darker than this more mustard yellow colour on the paint. You can see that where we are. there's a slight difference between these two. This is a little bit more yellowy than this Michael Harding one. You see that? Now they both say yellow ochre, so this is much more yellow than the Michael Harding one. But so it takes you to kind of trial them out, do your research on them. Plenty of YouTube videos out there who go through this whole process of what paint qualities are like. But it can be down to what works for you. When you're working with the less expensive paint, it's sometimes the mediums that it's mixed with can give you a different flow, which means you might need to use a slightly thicker paint, or you might need to use more of it, or the medium itself is quite sticky and you want it to flow a little bit better. There's others that you take the top off and all the oil is running out and you have to kind of mix up the paint almost again yourself. So all these things kind of play into the qualities of paint that you work with. Michael, totally get what you're saying, Lee. Find it hard to get in the zone. Was set to spend a couple of hours today but felt so flat and left it. Okay. I set a couple of hours aside tomorrow, fingers crossed. Yeah, I think that's totally right, Michael, when you're saying that about sometimes you just feel flat, especially during COVID. There's so many different elements to life at the minute, and it's very hard to kind of be that focused and that engaged with everything. And any number of things can kind of knock you off course a little bit, and sometimes to acknowledge I'm just not in the mood. Don't let the kind of I have to be in the artistic mood of creation to be, I can't do anything until I get that. Don't let that be the guys. But I know what you're talking about. Sometimes we just go, I feel a bit foggy today, my head's killing me, tired, we just shouted at the dog or the cat, and I really just want to sit down and watch some really sort of bubblegum TV and switch off. To go into a painting studio, paint at that point, you're kind of really fighting an uphill struggle. Do exactly what you've done. Go, okay, do you know what? Today's not right now. I'm going to read an art book instead. I'm going to watch a magazine. I'm going to watch a program about. I'd rather watch a program about art than do it today. Do that. But make sure that those couple of hours the next day, and you go into the studio and go, okay, kind of what we wanted to do this, and I've been looking forward to it, and allow yourself to have that treat. I often think of it like when you're eating a meal, doing the artwork is like the cherry on the top of the cake, or the favourite bit of fillet steak that you really, really want to eat, but you'll make yourself eat all the Brussels sprouts first before you get to it. And by the time you get to eating that lovely bit of steak, you're full with crap and you don't want to eat anymore. And it's a shame, because sometimes you can just eat the steak. Sometimes you can just do the thing that you like doing, and you don't have to go through all the process of eating all the vegetables first. This is my analogy for it anyway. That I'm sure parents are out there going, don't say that, because I'm trying to get the kids to eat vegetables. It could be that you love vegetables and eating that honey glazed carrot is your cherry, and you have to wade through eating all of the meat first to get to it. Whatever it is, always trying to find your route to your enthusiasm is a process like anything else. You can acknowledge that, I just don't feel like it today. Sometimes you have to go through, as a professional, you kind of go in, I'm not going to waste my time in the studio today. This is my life and my work. I need to be doing something. What can I do that can help me? I don't feel like I've just got the concentration levels to paint today, but I might have the time to do some of that research. I might watch that podcast and that artist doing that demonstration and pick up that my level of inspiration will then be infused because I know how to do that now. I want to try that out in my artwork. And you can take that enthusiasm of learning something when you were feeling flat and not capable of painting, to take that back and then put it into your artwork. So yeah, good honest way of looking at it. To be honest, I think I would have to treat it like a job. I sort of force myself to do it, whether I wanted to or not. Well, this is what I'm saying. It's a bit of a difference between how you can force yourself to do an aspect of your job, or just encourage rather than force, encourage yourself to take other elements. So the research side of it, or if the research side of it is like the or I don't want to do research, so I really enjoy doing the painting side of it. Find a different route that you can enjoy doing that research side of it. So it might be just watching YouTube videos. I often listen to podcasts when I'm going shopping. Nobody likes shopping. You buy the same stuff nearly every other week, you know, where it is in the aisles of the shopping supermarket, if it's not been changed around. And you'll be in there for about half an hour. Stick your headphones on, find your podcast on your phone, stick them in, and as you're walking around, you're listening to artists talk about artwork, and you're learning stuff. That could be your research. It's a lot more fun than going around shopping and listening to the elevator music that they pump out, or their in-house radio. You know, so you can find different routes around all these things. You can be as creative as you're learning your research side of it. You can be creative and make that as fun as you want, and therefore it's not then becoming a chore. If you are more routine and you have a certain allocated time to do certain things, there's a benefit of that as well, where that what's the word I'm looking for? I wouldn't say necessarily regimented, but that focus of making it nice and simple, bite-sized chunks, and you can do this and you can do that, and boom, and then this falls into that. It becomes quite clear and effortless that you're not having to think about it, and what you are able to think about is your artwork. That routine is very good. We're building a routine into something, helps you get through certain things. So I can see how different people work in different ways. I've seen it myself from working with students, and I've done it in different ways for myself to push my artwork on further forward, where you are restricted by size and scale because of your surroundings or about what physically you want to try and achieve, but you have to stay aware to what you're doing. And if things don't work, or you hit the problem, or you're constantly going, I never feel like I want to do the work, or I always hit the same problem when I'm painting, and I don't know what it is, I always hit the same thing. You know, sometimes you have to kind of reach out past that and go, right, how can I get over this hump? What do I need to do? And find your route around it. Now, you can discuss it here, you can talk about these different things. I can give you a few pointers or places to go and look and see. Certainly listening to different artists talk about their artwork and their processes on different podcasts, because you can identify with the similarities. The Jealous Curator is a good podcast to listen to. John Dalton, Gently Does It, is another good podcast to listen to, and you'll listen to all of these artists talk about their process in their studios, and sometimes they hit the same problems that you hit as a person starting out. You know, certainly about how times in their career they've hit like a plateau and they haven't known where to go with their artwork, and they've kind of talked around doing artwork, or they've made excuses to do other stuff and then come back to their artwork. But having that similarity, you can often hear about how I got over it was this, I tried that, I did this, and then you go, okay, maybe I'll try that, and it can help you move on with your artwork. So yeah, hopefully that works, helps you a little bit. Dedication and determination sometimes is a thing. Sometimes people love creating artwork, and it's so much like a treat they deny themselves it. They deny themselves eating that cherry, and it's almost like they haven't been good enough to allow themselves to be nice to themselves. You can be, and you have to go, no, I need to do this, and I want to do it, so I'm going to allow myself to do it. And it's like a treat to yourself. You can treat yourself into doing the things that you like doing. Some people go, no, I have to do all the horrible chores in the house first, then I'm allowed to do the 2 hours to do something nice. No, do something nice, and you'll find you've had so much fun doing it that you're in a good mood as you're doing all the chores, rather than being in a terrible mood doing all the chores you don't want to do. And when you get to do your artwork, you're in a foul mood and you're really frustrated. Do you know what I mean? Do the artwork first, then do the chores, because it's a lot easier. I think that's what I'm trying to get at today. It's kind of like how you work your process and your studio and your setup, but also how you work out your artwork in your mind. Before this is like not even talking about the artwork and physicality of doing the artwork, but answering some of those questions can really help you. So yeah, hopefully this helps out a little bit. So I haven't done much painting, or we'll do any painting today, but hopefully you'll get to sort of understand the kind of methodologies behind doing what I'm doing. There is another little white that I have here. It's called a warm white. It's by Michael Harding. If I stick it down here beside it, it's got a slight creaminess to it, which I quite like. So I'm going to pop out and start to put in some of these yellows. What was the yellow that I was looking for earlier on? This is what I was talking about. This shows you my bad practice from before. This is a Naples yellow, which I really like. What I'm going to do, start to roll it up already. You can clamp it in these things. It's like a little clamp grip, and as you turn it, the key, it squeezes up the paint up to the top. Where are we? There. And it just means that I now know that this is empty and that the paint is going out, so I can then put the paint out onto my palette. So the more and more I clamp and grip, it all gets kind of squished out and flattened, and I can then fold it around. But eventually I'll be left with, proper tubes of paint, and also putting the lids on properly is the other thing. This just reminds me of my mum shouting at me as a kid for not putting the lid on the top of a sauce bowl. I get what she's talking about now. When I look back at my work and I can see all the gunk and ooze of paint that's kind of congealed around my paint pot, it just makes it more messy. It makes it more messy in your box to try and find the paint. It makes it more messy to put out. So I'm learning to refine the process that I'm using in my painting. It's some burnt sienna. Again, there's like a reddishness to one of them, and more browniness to another. So these are both burnt siennas, but the colours and quality of paint differs between brands and qualities of brands as well. So I'm actually going to put down a raw sienna. I don't put yellow ochre down. I'm going to put yellow ochre down. Put yellow ochre down. Next. Now you can sort of see it's almost going step by step up your colour range, but it just helps you see where colours are. I'm giving a bit of space around each colour as well, so they're not contaminating each other, and not like jamming right up to each other's. And what we're going to do next year is go to that's a bit vibrant. We'll see. Well, we'll go to the cadmium yellow. This might not be how everybody sets their palettes out online and how you are supposed to set out your palettes, but I find it helpful for myself to kind of to find the palette colour range that works for me. Now there are more limited palettes that I would use for certain pictures where I don't need to have every colour of the rainbow on my yeah. You see, this has been sat in my box for ages, and what's happened is I lost the top, the paint's dried up on the top of the crust thing, and basically I can't use that anymore. So again, this is a case of when you're hitting problems with your artwork, I have lost quite a bit of paint in there that I now can't use because of the way I kept it, and it's going to cost me more money to go and get. So what I'm saying is it will save you money if you manage to get into a good working pattern with your paints. Getting a good working pattern with your paints, that you're not fighting with it with the process, you're not fighting with the mediums, that you're saving yourself time, you're saving yourself money. It makes it easier for yourself, it makes it more pleasurable to paint as well. This is the raw umber. This is quite oily, the raw umber from Michael Harding's, and there's quite a lot of oil content of oil mediums that is mixed in with the paint itself. The ground is in, this tells you there's an awful lot of information on this. The ground is actually linseed oil. This is a synthetic iron oxide ground in linseed oil. So it tells you about the qualities that are coming out. Now, you can see going from lights to darks there, a nice colour range starting to happen. I want to do the same things. I actually want to put some of the reds out as well, separate to that. So I've got a break where my reds are going. This is the Scarlet Lake from Michael Harding, which is a lovely colour. And I'm going to use an alizarin crimson. There's a couple of reds, so I'm getting like a warm and a cool red, and I want a warm and a cool blue. I might actually have a, yeah, well, this is a phthalo blue from Winton colour ranges. No, not, there is a nicer, I'll show you these two. This has much more of an indigo-y blue colour, and this has a much more reddish bluey colour to it. I don't know if you can see that. So this is the reddish bluey colour, and this is the sort of indigo-y bluey colour. And then on top of that we've got Michael Harding as well. So we've actually got, I'm going to put three. We'll check out this blue, Prussian blue as well. It's trying to find a warm and a cool blue of each. Yeah, I quite like the Michael Harding Prussian blue. I'm going to pop that out, but I'm going to put the Winton beside it because it's quite warm. There's a depth to that Prussian blue which I really like. The vibrancy to that Winton blue, which is quite fun. Quite like that. Again, putting these lids on properly will save me an awful lot of wastage later on. So one, you won't lose the lids in your box. You're not wasting loads of paint. Now there are little French ultramarines. There's lovely ultramarine blue by Michael Harding there as well. What else have we got there? So I'm not putting out every colour. Yep, and this is the ivory black. Now I'm going to have quite a separate area for this because there is actually going to be quite a lot of dark in this painting, but I wanted to build it up. This whole area is going to be dark. A lot of the armour is going to be dark with light coming off of it as well, so I've got to think about that works. So you have to go, Alex. No problem at all. Thank you very much for being here. You have to go. Bye to all next week. Yep. All being well, I'll get this back online for 2 o'clock next week. As I say, there's a bit of a nightmare with systems crashing and things like that this week. So thank you for being here. Thank you for staying with us. Really appreciate it. Dale and Joy, hi to you. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. So you have to go, Alex. No problem at all. Thank you very much for being here. You have to go. Bye to all next week. All being well. So we've just been chatting today generally about art setup and why you do what you do in the process of creating artwork, and to do with general concepts and ideas behind your work and how that feeds in and how can it kind of dictate your learning knowledge of you creating artwork. It can be a great guide about what you need to go and research and what you need to go and learn, and it's a constant process. It doesn't mean to say after you come out of university you know everything. You don't. I know myself, come out of university, realised how much I didn't know, and I left artwork for about 15 years. I did get an artistic type of job when I left university. I was a jewellery designer in a lovely jewellery store, worked with some great people, and Tim, if you're listening, he's a lovely fellow. He's a great horologist and jeweller. I learnt a lot from him, and I learnt other things, and I got into sort of retail management and moved away from art completely. I wasn't quite always happy, but I learnt an awful lot in it. And what I'm starting to do now is a lot of the aspects of business I've learnt from my retail experience, I am now imparting into my business knowledge for me as an artist. Not to say I am selling out or becoming like a shop of my art, but I am business-wise, I'm becoming quite aware of how these two things can work hand in hand. Whereas before I thought art was like this pure thing that can be tarnished by commerce and things like that, but there has to be a balance between the two. So now I've got into a process of how, if I'm finding a problem or an issue, I'm thinking of it much more along a more staged way about, okay, how do I get through this? How do I move past? Rather than going, oh, I have to wait until my muse calls me before I can go off and do something. I have to physically work through it, and that dedication and determination to get through something often helps you get over the hump of a problem. Often when you don't have, say, a source of inspiration. I often hear this thing where artists go, I hit a blank patch. I don't know what to paint. I don't know what it is I want to work on. You can't wait for inspiration to strike. You have to work for it. That's why, what's a quote? Inspiration will only find you when you're busy, or something like that. You can't just sit in the room and just stare into space waiting for inspiration. You have to work, and as you work, that inspiration will naturally come, because your experience between researching or experimentation or playing or just having fun watching artwork, if you're doing something, your ideas will start to flow. You've got to kind of feed your inspiration. And it's the same with work. When you're working at something, you hit a problem, you've got to figure a way around it. There's no point just going, well, I might as well give up painting, because every time I've got to paint, it's never what I want. You have to kind of break it down. What is it you want in your painting? Maybe you need to go and try different processes. Maybe you need to be brave and try a whole new genre of artwork that you've never tried before. Maybe that'll answer it for you. But be methodical, be pragmatic about it. What works, what doesn't work for you. Everybody's different. I'm not saying you have to work this way when you set out your palette. I'm saying what I found was my messiness of my palette was this. Right? To the clarity of my palette now being this. I now know where to go to get my colours. Mixing them's a lot easier. I'm not wasting so much time mixing paint and wasting paint in mixing paint colours up that are never going to work on my painting. I need to now be much more analytical about this type of things I want to try and do, type of quality of paints I want, has led me to go and research and find out how to do this. So it, it makes sense. Now, I'm not necessarily going to. I don't think I'll actually paint on this today. I think just having it here is a reminder about what it is I want to do on my palette. Mixing up my colours will save me time when I'm painting. I don't want to have to guess about the types of quality of paint I'm using. I want to have them kind of mixed and ready to go, so I know where to go on my palette to paint them. Often you see sort of paint stroke here. I have to mix up a whole brand new colour here, mix up my colour there, put it on there, and it's not the same. The colour's off, because as you're working with a messy palette, like I just showed you, the colours on your palette will make your colour that you're mixing up look brighter or darker or more vibrant or more muted, and it's not until you take it off put it on your brush and you put it on your canvas and you go, oh my god, that's the wrong colour. That's okay, that always happens in painting, but it becomes much more efficient and more easy. I want to try and make things easy for myself, that if you can see your colours and you can mix the colours up and you can get the colours that you want here, it makes this a lot more pleasurable, because you're also dealing about the illusion of depth of an orangutan sat on behind a lady wearing a suit of armour. You're dealing with depth. I want to see that illusion, to keep my objectivity on my composition, on the clarity of my concept, and not have to worry about my messy palette. That's clouding and slowing me down. I want to paint more. So this is one of the reasons why I kind of went back and started studying about how you actually set yourself up. Makes it a lot more pleasurable to paint, makes it easier. It does take a little bit of work. It doesn't feel natural to me right now, to be honest with you. It's something I'm having to work on and build confidence, but build a practice up in doing it, because I'm messy. Being a little bit more cleaner and more practical means I'm more efficient as a painter. It means I can create more artworks, which means I can enjoy the process a little bit more. That makes more sense to me. And as I said, I'm a slow learner. It's taken me a while to get to the stage of understanding that. But yeah, here we are at last. So, what I will be working on is darkening this whole background down. Now, it will mean that this figure and the armour will look flat against it, and won't look like it's standing out, which means I have to then put out the colours that I need to build up on this, build up the quality of the painting. I don't want to lose some of the quality of the face that I've got going on. I'll move that up a little bit. There's an attitude that I've got, and a look and a kind of care that she's got going on. There's a connection between these two things that have kind of built together my painting style back then, and there's some elements of that I want to keep, but there's a flatness to it that I want to try and deal with. I want to build the three-dimensionality of it, and that's something I have to do with both the painting process and the colours that I was using. But I do want to start to mix up the colour for this background. I want to give it a darker wash. I want it to be richer and warmer. I have to be careful that when you go into shadows or darknesses of things, and if you make them warm, generally as a balance, your lighter areas need to be cooler. I don't want it to be cool, I want it to be warm as well and calm. So there's a subtlety to it that we're working out with, but I want the darks to have a depth to them, if that makes sense. So rather than just going straight to, if I pop down this to this, rather than going straight to a black and putting straight black onto it, I want to build in a depth of colour to it. So I'm obviously not going to use white or any of these lighter colours, so it starts to push me around into this blues and reds. Now, having these two blues down, remember I was saying I had this warmer blue. I'm going to take some of that blue. Which is like a warmish blue colour. And I'm going to take some of the Michael Harding raw umber. I'm going to take some of this alizarin crimson as well from Michael Harding and start to mix these together. And as you see, hopefully you'll be able to see, I'll zoom down. Hopefully that'll work for you. It starts to appear quite black. But it also has a richness to it. It has a richer, warmer tone to it than just straight black. I want to make sure I get a good mix. Now often people think you paint with a palette knife. You can paint with palette knives obviously, but they're great for mixing with. Using this glass surface top means I can really pick up the paint and scrape it around, move it around, and flattening it out. Now I can look at that, make a decision looking at that paint. Well, the funny thing is, it's on the screen. I think it's taken like a greenish hue, but it's really black. But it's got a warmth to it, a much warmer hue to it than this black from straight from the pot. This is more clinical and cold to me. I might want to add a little bit more warmth to it still. So I'm going to add a little bit more alizarin crimson. I'm not going to stick this into the red. I'm going to clean this palette off before I select a part of it. What I can do is pull this paint back. It's quite bluish still. As a black, it's warmer than that ivory black. And again, you can get different blacks. You can get lamp black and so on. When you research them out, you can see different qualities of different blacks and what they do. There's plenty of material books out there which you can read upon. But some of it is literally getting your paints out, mixing them, playing around, experimenting with what colours do, what colours work for you, what you physically like yourself, your flavour. Now you can see I am messy. This is spreading out. I don't want it to go anywhere near my colours, so once I've done that and I've cleaned it off with my cloth, I'm going to select a bit more of this red. Take a little touch of that cadmium red as well. Scarlet Lake. Now, Scarlet Lake is a really good alternative mix for the cadmium. You can see those two mixed together. Scarlet Lake is a really good alternative mix for cadmium. Two mixed together. So I said mix of the cadmium, I meant an alternative to the cadmium red. Now it's got a slightly purplishly luxurious quality to that paint. Now again, it's very hard to see because you are looking at a camera lit in my room. It looks different on screen than it does in real life. but I don't know if you can see how redishly purpley black that is. Let's try and get you to focus. There we are. So it's got a blackness to it, but a real warmth, reddishness to it as well. It's got a lovely quality to it. The colour's quite nicely well mixed now, whereas I'm looking through that and I'm not finding any little streaks of other colours like the red, cadmium. It's really well mixed. It's not lost in the bristles of my brush. It's on my palette. It's on my palette knife. I can scoop that all together and set it down in one place. Now that's in one place, I can mix another colour to go along with it, but keeping it separate. I'll pop it over there, clean off my palette knife, and I can wipe this down. So keeping my paint area clear, my whole area of my mixing palette here, I am quite confident now I can mix up another colour without muddying it up. I've got my black that I want in that group. Oh, come back this way. I've got the black that I want to go on this back area here. Is there ready to go? I don't have to think about it. I'm not having to guess the colours that I'm going to mix up and where I'm going to put them. As I'm doing it, the colour's made. I can just get on with the idea now and process of concentrating on what I'm painting. No, I don't have to guess what colour I'm going to use. It's already done for me. I can now concentrate on the quality of my painting, the subtlety of brush marks, how forms go from hard to soft, how they go across the surface, and I need to lighten up or I need to cool them down, or to give the sense of a turn. I can manipulate that colour. This is what I was saying about just that little bit of extra preparation can save you oodles of time when you're painting. It can save you massive amounts of frustration where you're not worrying about what colour are you mixing up to put where. You're actually physically looking at the figure and going, okay, the highlight that comes across this piece of armour is curved, and it can't be on the top here because the highlight is coming from the front more in this direction, therefore the highlight has to be around about here. I'm thinking about the physicality of my painting, not the colours of my paint, because the colours are already done. So making up little colour studies is really good tip, where you do almost like a little tiny maquette painting, not of detail but literally of colour, of the type of black you'd want in the background, the type of colours you'd want in the armour, the orangeness of your orangutan. All of these things kind of worked out in just little tiny block forms, not a massive amount of detail, and those colours then become your base palette to work from, and you can manipulate them, you can tweak them and lighten them and darken them and add little nuances to that, but your basic colours are worked out for you. You're not having to guess. You're literally just concentrating on the quality of your image at that point because the colours are done. Hope that makes sense. I'm going to call it there today. As you see, I know it's frustrating, I haven't painted. I'm going to actually spend my time painting now and the rest of the evening, where I can play around with the colours I'm going to work on for the armour and the chimpanzee and the face and the hair and all those elements, and I want to pull them all together, and I'm going to be working on this until it's done. Now, I'm not saying that it'll be done today or tomorrow or next week, but I'm now engaged with the process of actually painting this painting, whereas it's been sat nearly for 2.5 years in my studio staring at me. And it's been because I've not been able to challenge myself into answering some of the questions I needed to learn. I've done that now. Now it's time to get on with it, and I'm kind of more enthused to get on with the work. This is what we were talking about earlier when we were saying where you hit that little bump. Sometimes you have to acknowledge it and just take the rest and take the time away and off and just have a bit of fun and think about it. But when you feel like you're inspired to do it, that's the goal. The more you practice that, the more it becomes part of your process to find your enthusiasm and to find out your solutions and things like that. It doesn't become an effort anymore. It becomes part of the joyful process, and that's what I'm really hoping for you guys that you get from this, is that you have to work at it, but working at it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be a chore. It can be the fun part of the process as well. So I hope that makes sense. Hope you got something out of this week. Again, apologies for being so late. It's not exactly the 2 hours, so I think about 8 minutes off. But I think it's a good place to stop. So you can see the process of the palette, how that was set up. It looks great already, and Joy, looking forward to seeing it complete. Yeah, me too. And I hope you find your drawing mojo tomorrow, Michael. Just enjoy it. Take the pressure off. Just enjoy it. And if it's too much pressure for you to do that portrait that you're working on, maybe start another one. Even if you just spend time looking for an image that you want to draw next, you know, that might be the thing that gets you over the hump as well. Very simple tip about these nested tables and becoming a good drawing, good palette surface to create one of these palettes. I've seen palettes online that cost a fortune, and this cost me 15 quid from a second-hand charity shop and a bit of paper, but they're really functional as well. So guys, thank you very much for being here. Really enjoyed it. This is our cat again. We'll be back on YouTube 2 o'clock, hopefully next Saturday. Till then, take it easy. See you then. Bye. I've seen palettes online that cost a fortune, and this cost me 15 quid from second.